Coming up, we talk with Gary Berman about the journey from victim to advocate and how a kiss at a comic convention changed his world. Then Paul and I are going to talk about an article based on a listener request. That's right. Someone wrote in and said, hey, I want Michael and Paul to talk about this. So we're going to. Then we're going to dive into the power of problems, questions, and how to avoid making bad choices with your time. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Brought to you by today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/BSW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. Are you getting pressure to improve your data security? Would you like a faster, easier, better way to patch? Then you need to check out Automox. Automox is a cloud-native platform that patches and manages every endpoint, even remote servers and devices, including Windows, Mac, Linux, and third-party software from a single dashboard. Improve your cyber hygiene, reduce your attack surface, and save 90% of the effort you spend patching. Automox, your patching system of record. Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending your assets? Have you penetration tested your public assets? Start 2018 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Business Security Weekly. We made it to episode number 93, circling in on 100. We're recording this live Monday, July 23rd, 2018. This is the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. We have a simple goal. We want to be your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. I'm still Michael Santarcangelo. I don't think that's going to change. I'm your straight-talking guide, elevated performance, and accelerated results. I get the pleasure of working with both enterprise security teams and vendors. I'm the person that helps translate what's so valuable into what other people can understand, and it's really my pleasure to be here and share a lot of the lessons I'm learning along the way. And my partner in crime, from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, your friend mine, it's Paul Asadorian.
Hey, thanks, Michael. I thought you were changing your name to like Michael.com.
I keep thinking about it.
Like,
I've been thinking about it.
He did the Kim.com thing, like legally change his name. Like, you could go in that direction. I mean, Michael.com sounds pretty good, dude.
I should be like Michael.info or something. Yeah. Like, be like really esoteric with it and then just make it myself a symbol and walk away.
There you go.
I've thought about it.
What would your symbol look like, Michael? I'll let you do some whiteboarding sessions on that.
I should probably rethink how that would work.
Yeah, we're not asking listeners for suggestions. Just put it that way. Could get interesting.
That'd be funny. That'd be really funny. Well, before we get into it with Gary, because of course we've got to understand this KISS. Let me just remind everybody quickly. We've started our survey, and actually we've got some great responses, and I really appreciate it. And I keep looking at it. It's on average, it's 5 minutes a time. To fill it out. It's a couple questions. A lot of them are multiple choice, and then we want to know, what are you focusing on? What are the things that you're loving about what we're doing? What are the things you want more of, things you want less of? What can we do differently? How do we better meet your needs? This helps us all around. It helps us with the programming. It helps us with understanding your needs. It helps us guide our sponsors to the right choices. It's really useful for us, and so we try to keep it really simple for you. And really easy to find. Just go to securityweekly.com, and right on the menu bar, upper right-hand side, it says Survey 2018. Click that. 5 minutes. Rock it out. Many thanks.
Yeah, we learned that many of our Security Weekly listeners don't really know that we have a cigar show. And I'm not sure how much of their audience there is in an overlap, but we do have a cigar show.
I think it's a surprising amount, to be fair.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing, Paul. A lot of people have known you from when you started Paul's Security Weekly. And the network has grown and proliferated. And what's neat is each of the shows has a slightly different flavor and a different area of focus. And so, if depending on where you're at in security, they all might be of value to you. And then when it comes to the weekend or the night, the Stogie Geeks is probably a fantastic show to kick back.
StogieGeeks.com. You can subscribe every Friday. We do that. Hey, if you like cigars,
like NASCAR.
And I am going to do, I forgot about this idea. I am going to do a crossover style segment between the cigar show and the security show and vice versa. So stay tuned for that.
Listen, every time you've talked to me, Paul, I've learned a lot about it, and I think there's a lot there, so it'll be interesting. I'll look forward to it. All right, let's bring on Gary Berman. Gary's the CEO of Cyberman Security, and points out that until recently he knew very little about technology, even less about cybersecurity, but he was victimized in a lot of insider problems, and it teaches you a lot about it. You can learn more about Gary, too. He was on Paul's Security Weekly, episode 566, and we can put the link up in the show notes, and that way you can go get a little bit more about that. And so Gary's going to join us today to talk about his journey and the lessons that he's learned and the business side of it, along with some benefits for every leader listening. It was great talking with Gary to get ready for this, and I know we're going to enjoy that. So Gary, welcome back to Security Weekly as a network, and welcome to Business Security Weekly for your first time.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I love that Paul-inspired background as opposed to my corkboard with nothing on it at the moment.
Well, it's kind of amazing, what you can do with a $10 comic kit from Amazon, and at 61 years of age, I just started over and jumped into this superhero world. It's crazy.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. I know you gave some of the background before, but basically your background is marketing communications, right?
Yes, I was really fortunate. I had a very successful marketing communications company for about 25 years. And so the bad stuff started happening, basically, to make a very long story short, while I was out with a very serious illness, several of my trusted, or so I thought, trusted employees basically spoofed my company, took our intellectual property, spoofed our website, redirected phone calls to their company, called our biggest clients, which were AT&T, Best Buy, Procter & Gamble, General Motors, alleging that there was rampant fraud in our data collection facility. They told people to not communicate with me in any way because I was under investigation by the FBI, and basically we weren't able to sustain ourselves after several years. So it wasn't just me. I unfortunately had to lay off about 100 employees. So that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, that's a heck of a lesson. So then how do you make the pivot? Give us a little bit of how did you learn from that? And I think that's a story that a lot of our audience can tell, not because they've lived through it, but because we're trying to prevent people from living through something like that. So you've made this pivot now. You don't see yourself as a victim. You're turning yourself into an advocate. What sparked that in you? How did you get to that?
Well, beginning about 2 years ago, I started to listen and learn about cybersecurity because this series of attacks actually went on in a different way. The FBI referred to it as cyber stalking for another 10 years. So basically, I had 15 years of this kind of torment. And finally, after a lot of time and effort, we're able to get some closure on that. And basically, I decided to try to see if there was some way to convert this improbable, unbelievable experience into something that would help other people. And so I did a deep dive into your world, into cybersecurity. And I started listening and learning to podcasts and reading countless stories and books and going to conferences. And so one of the things that I pretty quickly came away with is it's incredibly complex. And I don't have to tell you or your listeners about that, And so my big aha moment, Michael, came when I got a book called Cybersecurity for Dummies, and I started reading it. And 10 pages in, I'm telling you, I was absolutely lost. So I was able to get one of the authors in the company that produced it, the CTO of Palo Alto Networks, and I got him on the phone. And I said, look, I just got done reading your book, and in 10 minutes I was lost, and what's the story? And he broke out laughing, and he said, well, it's not really for beginners. And so I paused, sort of put my marketing hat or common sense, and I said, then why do you call it cybersecurity for dummies? And that was another piece of what happened, because concurrently I happened to be seeing the movie Spider-Man in the theaters, and it was like these two big planets coming together, this ubiquity of hacking and cybersecurity with all these super hero movies, which now, by the way, there are 8 in 2015, 3 of which have set records. They kind of crashed together, and that's how the Cyber Hero Adventures was conceived of.
Gary, I have a question for you, because in analyzing the market today, I've seen a lot of security vendors use the For Dummies series and other series as basically marketing efforts. And now you're taking this comic book, we're engaged with you to take it to Black Hat, to our audience. I guess my question is twofold. Why do companies brand these books and try and call it marketing? And why is that can be successful or not? And then how does the comic book really differ from that effort?
That's a really great question. One of the things that I took away from all my listening and learning is this industry really relies quite a bit on fear as a motivator to do something, to buy, some vendor solution, so on and so forth. And I thought there had to be a better way. And so why not take and distill complex cybersecurity and technology information into digestible bites that really are entertaining? And really, most people like superheroes, and there's a lot of data in support of that. So while I applaud people who are attempting to accomplish that, to me, even the title "Cybersecurity for Dummies" is not particularly inviting. You're insulting the reader.
Feel the same way.
So personally, I would advise against that. And so I guess what's different about our approach is its adventure. And the other cool thing is, like, I didn't just make this stuff up. I have real life cybersecurity drawn into experts. I make them cyber heroes. They're drawn into the comic. So one of the really cool things about this, it's been amazing and humbling at the same time, is starting from nothing. I had an early version of the cover of the comic on my LinkedIn page with like no connections, and I started inviting CSOs and CISOs, to connect with me. And I asked on my LinkedIn profile 3 questions. Please send me blinded stories of real life cybersecurity crime and answer 3 questions. What happened? What were the consequences? And most importantly, what were the lessons learned for possible inclusion and into future editions of the comic? And it went crazy. And now, I have 21,000 connections on LinkedIn. Almost all of them are senior people.
And I think we touched on this briefly in the Paul Security Weekly interview, but there was a long time ago, and actually Jeff Mann gave us a copy. I have it in the studio somewhere. I don't know if it's on display or safely tucked away, but like probably 15 plus years ago, a cybersecurity company created a comic book as a marketing effort, and it largely failed because the women were very scantily clad, and it was generally poo-pooed by the higher ups, and there was only a few copies circulating around. I think that's actually one of the things that kind of leads to why we don't see more comic books being used in our industry in terms of marketing, education, security training, awareness efforts. Might stem from that bad experience back then.
That's an incredibly valuable insight. And so the first edition of the comic we released at Hack NYC in New York, and distributed and printed out about 700 copies of it because we wanted to listen and learn from the marketplace. And one of the things that played back to us for sure was the lack of women in the cybersecurity ecosystem and technology, as well, also in diversity. And so in our very first edition, we had a character named Queen Mallory. she's not scantily clad at all. She looks, she has 4 arms, and is a creature, from another world, not of this world. But she was a villain. And so one of the things we learned is, wow, there seems to be a lack of women role models. So in this next printing, which will be our large distribution at Black Hat, we're printing 4,000 hard copies for distribution there. We've actually pivoted, and now Queen Mallory has a different name, Queen Geo, and she's turned from the dark side to the good side, and now she's dedicated her whole life to being a role model for women in cybersecurity, to encourage women to enter the field, and to encourage young people to start taking STEM courses.
That's awesome. Love it. Let's put in certainly a positive spin, because I can see, and everyone gets like feedback, mostly negative, from doing various things in various marketing efforts and or conferences. I know I speak to folks that run very large conferences, and it's really stressful for them based on the amount of feedback that they're getting today. So to take that feedback and really incorporate that as a valuable lesson in the comic, Gary, I think that's just awesome.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, and I want to go back too. I love the questions that you asked, right? What happened? What were the consequences? What were the lessons learned? So then when you incorporated these real life stories into the comic, and I love that because that's going to resonate with people. It's not going to seem far-fetched. It's what we're living. Did you look for trends then, Gary? Did you say, okay, wow, I'm seeing a lot of these, and they're essentially now composite stories, but did you try to elevate based on common themes or things that stuck out to you? How did you choose what the narrative looked for the first edition?
Yeah, that's a really great question. The most common form of hack, as you well know, is phishing. So for us, that was a low-hanging fruit decision. So we took a real-life case study where a CEO was ostensibly at a charity golf tournament late on a Friday, sent an emergency email to his accounts payable person at the company, please wire $50,000, to this charity, and of course it was a phishing attack and fraud, and they lost the money. So for us, that very first topic was easy to pick. But what's really cool about the model is, and it also fits with my goal of trying to do something good in the world, is we're donating all the digital copies free around the world. And if we're fortunate enough to get a corporate sponsor, then they're the ones who will help, fund this effort. So the future issues of the comic are going to focus on 10 sectors of the economy and go deep into them. In terms of the content, yeah, and so for example, we use 2 criteria. One are the largest sectors, and what are the ones that are most likely to be hacked. So of course, right up front is going to be financial services and everything about that. Then you have other retail. Then you have healthcare, because the consequences, unfortunately, could be death. And we have education, connected cars. And so our model is to co-create with the industry this beautiful, credible content in the form of a comic, and then have the leaders of that industry fund it by being inside the comic. For example, off the top of my head, like let's say you go to Best Buy and you buy a connected device, a TV or a computer or a Fitbit, whatever. Then as you're leaving, you get a copy of the comic, How to Keep You and Your Family Safe, brought to you courtesy of Best Buy. So, and same thing with the digital copy. So that's our economic model.
That's really smart. Yeah. And what I'm enjoying listening to you about it too, and this is something you said in our prep, is that it's about elevating the people. It's about elevating people in a story, and it's giving folks in security that often are overlooked, or Paul, as you and I've covered a lot, the most common thing people hear in security is what we got wrong. And we feel repressed to speak up because someone might be upset with us. Or we've been saying no for so long that now sometimes we say yes to far too much to our own detriment. Having something where you're distilling a story, you're telling it well, and you're elevating what we do. You're shining a very good light on very valuable work. I think that's really exciting to a lot of people. And you and I talked about how you don't have to sell on fear. It doesn't have to be fear. So what I'm enjoying about your ability to tell the stories is you have a background in that, and you have now some hard-won personal experience that's got to make it easier for you to try to put together the story in a way that shines the light on people and promotes all these good types of things. What kind of feedback are you getting from that? When people look at the comics and you've been out now doing more presentations and you're available to do more presentations, and one of the things I pointed out to you is instead of standing in front of a group, I mean, if you go look at a lot of the topics, it's all the bad things happening, all the things we're not doing, all the reasons we're going to screw it up, and suddenly you're standing up and say, let me tell you how awesome you guys are. That's such a great message. So what are you learning as you're doing that? What kind of feedback are you getting on that?
I really appreciate that question. Paul, a few weeks ago, asked me, do I feel closure? And my response to him was about 6 weeks ago. And the reason is that I gave my first public speech at the Gartner Security and Risk Management Conference in Washington, D.C. as their invited guest. And I shared the evidence of our story, some of the details, and the big pivot into creating superhero comics. After it was over, I didn't know what to expect. People came up and literally were hugging me. It was the most beautiful experience, this outpouring of support, people asking, what can we do to help launch this? It was just amazing. And they even started asking me to sign autograph copies of the comic, and so that to me was the big moment. And to your point earlier, Michael, with your permission, I'm just going to read you something here, which is the dedication inside the actual comic. And it says, one of the many lessons that I've learned as the victim of a 15-year series of insider cyber crimes is that the only time people hear about hacks is when the hackers are successful. This life-changing endeavor is dedicated to all of the unsung, real-life cyber heroes and law enforcement professionals who toil without fanfare or acknowledgement every day to defend us all at work, home, and at school. And it was easy for me to say that because the outpouring of help has just been a blessing.
No, it's great. We need something positive, and that's fantastic. All right, so we've been talking about a lot of this stuff. But you don't draw the comics, right? You're a marketing person by trade and experience, not a comic book artist, right?
Well, I lead the creative team. This took me 2 years to get to what you're seeing now. And so originally I did the character development, the stories, to get them to kind of a minimally viable, prototype. And I worked with an artist, this was about a year ago, out of the country. So my whole circadian rhythm was nuts. I start work at 10 at night and work till 6 in the morning. So we got it to a minimal, I had a cover done. And then one day at this Comic-Con that you referenced, I ran into some guys who did some great creative stuff, and they ended up, the CEO of this group here where I live, ended up becoming an advisory board member and owns some shares in my company. So we have a great creative team, and for sure, the smart one in my family is my wife, Valerie. She's our chief learning officer, and she has a master's in curriculum development from Stanford University. And she makes sure our pedagogical stuff, is reasonable. This is not to be confused with a whole curricula, but we wanted to make sure that it was following some basic, educational principles and still be fun.
Now, I still want to get back to the kiss because we promised people would tell them about the kiss, but I just want to point out something that's interesting, and I've said it to you, but I just want to make sure everybody else understands this. I think a lot of people look at this and say, okay, well, I could draw out some cartoons too, or what have you. And by the way, some of you probably can, and they would look great. But what I've enjoyed about understanding this whole experience is that this is driven very much from the heart for you, Gary. But you have some real life experience, so you understand what it's like to be on the other side of this. You've reached out to the community, made yourself part of it. You may still not feel that way, but you're part of the community now, and you're listening to the stories. You're admiring the right things. You're looking for the right behavior. Oh, but by the way, also have a chief learning officer that understands learning pedagogical concepts. And so it's, you're not just capturing stuff and telling it, you're learning how to edit it. You're learning how to shorten it down and tell a story. You're putting a different focus than the industry is used to, but you understand communication, you understand marketing, you understand learning. That's so powerful, because a lot of people who try to do stuff like this don't completely understand that. And sometimes they're wildly successful. And other times they wonder why things aren't gaining traction, and it's because they don't have that complete package. But what I loved was when I asked you about how you built a team, you said, oh, funny story, and it starts on a Friday night when you see a local advertisement. So take us quick through the power of that KISS. That way I can deliver on that promise, and then we'll see if you got any parting thoughts here.
It was late on a Friday night, flipping through the channels on some local cable channel, and I saw just the very end of an advertisement. So I didn't really see what was in it. Come to Comic-Con or the website. So I knew it was here locally where I live. So I figured, okay. And so the next morning, I got up, put on my blazer, my white shirt, and I go to the Comic-Con, and as I'm walking in the parking lot, even before I got into it, this woman with a green face and antenna and these big butterfly wings came over and gave me a kiss. So right away, at the very least, I knew that I was overdressed, let alone, about to experience something, completely unique. And it was. I just went to my second one this week, and I have this incredible eye-opening experience and this admiration and respect for people who exist in this other world, this alter ego, and the joy they get from it, the creativity of what they call cosplay, which I've learned now is short for costume play. I sat in, I was only going to stay for 30 minutes, and I ended up staying 5 hours. So it was an incredibly beautiful world that I was ignorant of, but not anymore.
No, I love that. And it's a neat way to build a team too, because and that'll fit to something we'll talk about in the next segment of how you augment your stuff the right way. Lots of lessons learned. Anything stand out in terms of making that pivot from victim to advocate, just kind of starting over and picking a really unique way to do it? What's the biggest thing that stands out to you?
That you're never too old to change. Hands down. When I first started thinking about doing comics, people are going, are you nuts? I mean, what do you know about comics? And I said, at least I won't have any, misimpressions about them. And I just went in, this would be my second lesson. You have to go into something like this with an open mind and an open heart. And I guess the third thing that I took away more from a skill set standpoint, it is incredibly difficult to do this well. And, I have now 5 high-level cybersecurity advisors who help us all the time. And it takes a real team, to make something like this be successful.
No, that's awesome. All right. When we come back in the next segment, we'll tell you where you can get your hands on one of these copies with Paul out in Vegas. So this is going to be good. We'll talk about that in a second, but let's take a quick break. Good chance, go to securityweekly.com. Remember, upper right-hand side, survey 2018. Take 5 minutes, fill it out for us. Otherwise, you can check out the rest of the shows, the programming, the writing, everything we've got there for you. And when we come back, the listener-stimulated discussion, along with how to avoid sabotaging your own time. See you in a minute.